Yeah, so you're okay, fair enough.
Okay, so we are going live, ma'am. A very good evening to all of you. This is CMA Dr. Aditi Dasgupta, your host for today's program. Independence through financial literacy is a powerful path towards achieving the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. By equipping individuals with essential financial knowledge, we foster economic independence, reduce poverty, and support sustainable economic growth. Financial literacy empowers people to make informed decisions, manage resources responsibly, and invest in their communities. This creates a ripple effect that advances multiple SDGs, such as reducing inequalities, promoting gender equality, and fostering economic stability. In presence of financial literacy is more than just personal empowerment. It is a cornerstone for building resilient, inclusive societies aligned with the UN's vision for a sustainable future. For this awareness and knowledge dissemination, the Sustainability Standards Board of the Institute of Cost Accountants of India has arranged today on 8th of November 2024 as a part of its Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam webinar series, its 20th webinar on the topic Independence through Financial Literacy, a route to achieve UN's Sustainable Development Goals. It is our honor to have with us Ms. Priya Subbaraman, the co-founder and director, Dhira Skill Day Foundation, as our guest speaker to address the topic. But before we start off, we would start with our institute anthem.
असतो मा सद्गमय तमसो मा ज्योतिर्गमय मृत्युर्मामृतं गमय असतो मा सद्गमय तमसो मा ज्योतिर्गमय मृत्युर्मामृतं गमय असतो मा सद्गमय तमसो मा ज्योतिर्गमय मृत्युर्मामृतं गमय.
It is our honor to have with us Ms. Priya Subbaraman, the co-founder and director of Dhira Skill Day Foundation, as our guest speaker to address the topic. Briefly to introduce our esteemed speaker for today's seminar, Priya Madam is the co-founder and director of Dhira Skill Day Foundation, a social impact startup focused on financial literacy and capacity building. She is an independent director on the boards of Axis Asset Management Company Limited and Sustainable Energy Infra Investment Managers Private Limited. Previously, she was associated with the Kotak Mahindra Group, Standard Chartered Bank, Goldman Sachs India, Lehman Brothers India, and has headed the regulatory department of the National Stock Exchange of India Limited as its chief regulatory officer. Madam has also been a director on the board of the National Securities Depository Limited and is a member of the advisory council of the Center of Excellence in Teacher Education, Tata Institute of Social Sciences. She has a bachelor's degree in law and is an associate member of the Institute of Company Secretaries of India. Today, Madam would be sharing valuable insights on the topic, offering us guidance on the subject that is both timely and impactful. Please join me in welcoming our chief guest, Madam Priya Subbaraman. All yours, ma'am.
Thank you, Dr. Dasgupta, and thank you to the SSB as well and of the ICMI for inviting me here. You know, it took us about 30 years, and I worked in professional services for 30 years before I decided last year, me and my co-founder set up Dhira. The reason why we did that is also, and before we talk about SDGs and everything else, let's just talk about, some of the reasons for why financial literacy might be important. You already set out, Dr. Dasgupta, a lot of reasons, which has to do with SDGs, but think about it in a little different way. I hope I'm audible, right? There's no problem from a...
Yes, ma'am. No problem.
Okay.
Kindly carry on.
So the way we thought about it is, hamari sari zindagi, we are able to put onto social media, where we are traveling, how much we are spending, all our photographs, and even, in fact, even medical. We are able to, we put it on Twitter, we put it on God knows, 10 others, Facebook, and so on and so forth. The one thing that we don't talk about is finance. And we never talk about it. It's almost, and what happens is what me and my co-founder found as a result of, people feeling hesitant to talk about finance, talk about money management, is the fact that then when, all of us need money for our survival, for our growth, for building our wealth and so on. But when we don't talk about this, what really happens is, when you need to take action, whether it is a question of saving, it's a question of converting savings to investment, whether it's a question of protection, whether it's a question of dealing with cyber fraud or any other kind of fraud, what ends up happening is you take advice from people that are not professionals. So, and we also found another thing that we ended up finding is, when you think about financial literacy, a lot of the people that are into financial literacy are also themselves service providers. So they are either, either it's a bank, or it is a broker, or it is somebody else. Therefore, there is always that little bit of conflict. I'm not saying that, these entities should not provide financial literacy. They absolutely should, and there's a lot of good material available. But there is a little bit of a conflict when people think in terms of financial literacy, but you have a product to sell. So one of the key things that we, from a Dhira perspective, we have done is to actually say we will not sell anybody's product or service, because that's the first thing which people ask, kiska kya product bech rahe ho? But we just wanted to be sure that we don't do that. And coming back to financial literacy, what is financial literacy in the first place? Let's keep the textbook definition aside, and we'll go to that in a minute. We think about physical fitness. We know about physical fitness. We know about the products that we buy. Especially, and I keep giving this example, right? That ek sabzi kharidne ke liye also we are, examining it 20 times. But when it comes to using our money, and I'm not talking about the spending of the money, because there we do a lot of homework. We do a lot of, we look at 10 different reviews before we decide to buy something. It is the saving of the money and investing of the money where we are not necessarily doing enough work. It's not that information is not available. It is. It's just that we're not doing enough work in using our money appropriately. And therefore, if you think about it, if you think about our entire, country, which is using its money not in the best possible way, is not investing in the best possible way, is not doing things in the best possible way, what ends up happening is our GDP suffers, right? Anecdotally, one of the things that, and there's not a lot of research in this, so therefore I'm saying anecdotally, potentially the GDP, India's GDP and potentially world GDP can actually increase by more than 1%. And if you're if you're looking at a growth of say 6.7, 6.8, or closer to 7, if everybody were to use their money optimally, then potentially the growth rate can be north of 8. So that is the kind of impact that one can actually have if we are able to, and I also do understand that from a money perspective, when you think about investment, there's also a lot of emotional need to it. Because one of the things that we keep saying is today, and as part of our sessions, we also say that today, if you look at the interest rate for a home loan, it may be at, if you're a good credit, then it may be at 8.75 or it may be at 9. However, we know that the rent that we are going to get, suppose we don't want to stay in the same house, we want to give it out on rent, we are going to get is not more than 3.5%. There is a net interest margin of almost 5.5 to 6%. But house ownership is an emotional decision. You cannot measure it only with dispassionate eye of this is the right way from a money perspective, so this is what I will do. So money has a lot of emotional connect as well. Using of money has a lot of emotional connect. when we talk to the communities which are at the bottom of the pyramid, or when we talk to communities that are at bottom of the investment pyramid, they know very well that they are not supposed to borrow from usurious loans from the money lender. They are not supposed to take interest, money at interest rates of 24%, 36%. But they do it. For two reasons. One is it's a question of practice, because everybody else is doing it. There's also the social pressure. Very few people will then go out and seek a institution that gives out loans, because sab yahi kar rahe hain. That is one. And secondly, the answer is also it's easy. So therefore, when we think about literacy and when we think about SDGs, and we'll just talk about a little bit about financial inclusion before we go into financial literacy and then the SDGs. The fundamental point is money is not that easy. Using money, investing money, taking loans, all of that is not an easy decision. It's not just an emotional decision. There are a lot of other factors which come into play. So one of the things that we would like to do as part of our financial literacy journey is to actually take some of that emotion and convert the heart into the head, so to speak, or heart into mind, so to speak. Make some of those decisions a lot more, and also try and make people understand that some decisions need to be automatic. Don't invest into the decisions, just invest into one particular thing. For example, systematic investment plan. Once you've made up your mind that this is what you want to do, then don't invest in that decision again, because then the money will just keep getting debited from the account. We talk about USA, I'll do some of that as well. But coming back to the Dr. Dasgupta, are my slides moving? Because I'm not able to do both.
Yes, ma'am, they're moving.
Okay.
You're on your second slide, right?
Yeah, I'm on the second slide,
yes.
financial inclusion slide.
Okay. Yeah.
So coming back to what I was talking earlier, financial inclusion is a very critical part. There are all our regulators, so therefore RBI, the SEBI, IRDA, PFRDA, all of them under the aegis of the government have actually come up with a strategy for financial inclusion for all the right reasons that Dr. Dasgupta mentioned. There are SDGs. There is a very clear need to push India forward, to elevate poverty, and we know that the income inequality in this country is significant. And we also, anecdotally, we also know that just one time somebody falls sick, it may not even be the bread earner, but the one time that somebody falls sick, almost all the savings of that particular family can get wiped away. People are literally in a way, the poor people are just one sickness away from bankruptcy. So therefore, now financial inclusion is as important as, from a government perspective, it's exceedingly important. And the other part is, once you know about finance, you also, and this is a question which keeps getting asked to us, right? That okay, I know about finance. Are we talking only about personal finance? The answer is no, because knowing about how to save, how to convert savings into investment does not really lead you to the best possible outcomes. One thing is also skill development and job creation, because these, in a way, to my mind at least, go hand in hand. That there is this whole financial literacy, there is the education that should, in a way, light people's interest in understanding how best they can push forward their journey, whether it is earning, whether it is entrepreneurship. So again, to go back to an example, when we were talking to certain self-help groups and we were talking to certain foundations that work with self-help groups, the point is not to do a financial literacy session, tell them how to manage their money, tell them what is a bank account. They have bank accounts anyway. So tell them what is a recurring deposit, tell them what is cumulative interest, speak to them about compound interest and come back. That's not the point. The next point is also to talk to people as to how can you expand your current livelihood? You're already part of an SHG. There is already a product which is being made or a service being provided. More often than not, it is a product. Therefore, what is it that you can do next? How can you find newer markets? How can you make yourself more professional in order to cater to the newer market? So that's also something that is frankly critically important and goes together as part of our financial literacy and education. I have not sort of highlighted it here because that's a different capacity building vertical, but most people that are into financial literacy also think about skill development in a way that it's almost a product. In a way, it combines itself very well when you start talking to people in terms of their own journeys. So now coming back to the meat of what we are going to do, financial inclusion and SDGs. Now, financial inclusion, and you can see it on screen as well. One of the key things about financial inclusion, one of the key goals of financial inclusion is clearly to eradicate poverty. And there's a lot of it when we think about the larger world in India as well and the larger world. Ending hunger, achieving food security and promoting sustainable agriculture. Now, one would think about how does financial inclusion do this? Now, we see a whole lot of UN programs and programs from other funders as well, which talks about achieving food security, and financial inclusion through achieving food security also means better seeds, better ways of agriculture, sustainable practices, and the question that I used to ask earlier is, what has finance got to do with it? But fundamentally, if you start understanding how your money works and how can you get maximum efficiency, that is when some of the other metrics that we need for the greater good, so to speak, actually happens. Profiting of health and well-being, straightforward. One of the things that almost every financial literacy person will do is to talk about financial literacy with an end goal being financial fitness. Pretty much like you need, physical fitness and mental/emotional fitness to be a human being that's happy. We think about financial fitness in the same way. So financial inclusion and financial literacy being part of financial inclusion in a way should actually lead to your financial fitness. That's the end goal. And we also know, and gender equality and economic empowerment of women is critically important. And I think almost everybody would have seen a video which it went viral in terms of how many. So there was a video which sort of had men and women stand in the same line, and then there were questions asked to men and women, and if you did certain things well, then you had to take a step forward, and if you did certain things little less better, then you had to take a step backward. And I think we all know what happened at the end of it in terms of at the end of that particular quiz session, so to speak. You had men who were far ahead and then women far behind, and it was going to take a really long time to catch up. Equally, there are some statistics which say that today the gender pay parity, to achieve gender pay parity, where men and women will be paid the same amount for the same level of work, it will take 250 years. Therefore, achieving gender equality, and if we are looking at these kind of numbers, 250 years, 100 years, etc., we're really not in good shape. So that's also part of the SDGs, where financial inclusion and potentially financial literacy has a lot of part to play. Economic growth and jobs, I think, fairly straightforward. In terms of what financial inclusion chooses to achieve. Supporting industry, infrastructure, and innovation, that is the other SDG. But in this, I think the most important and the key one is innovation. We're talking about innovation of just about every type. Innovation in terms of education, and in fact, I was at a seminar 2 days ago. One was talking about the whole day was spent in talking about innovative financing to education. What is blended finance? How can education become better? In education, I think most of us have now realized, at least by talking to a whole lot of students, that they're really not interested in learning out of a textbook. I was talking there, and we had a conversation which sort of said that when we were younger, we spent I think most of us around the room and who joined this live event would have actually gone to state schools. We didn't really understand very much around what we were being taught. We knew that there were exams to take and we had to study and we had to do our homework. And the whole practical aspects of the education used to be reduced to literally to one class when we had a lab. And that would be just one class, and that only in science. There wasn't really any practical application of any of the other subjects that we were reading or studying. But for all intents and purposes, that was just the way we were. But today, when we think about education, when we think about innovation, not in education, we think about innovation in industry, we think about different kinds of infrastructure. Technology has to necessarily play a very huge part in it, right? So when we to go back to what I said about education, technology in terms of, everybody talks about AI, but without necessarily understanding what is the specific thread of AI, which will be useful for certain things and not certain other things. Largely from an education perspective, innovation in education might really, work very well when we're thinking about professional courses, when we are thinking about, even if we're thinking about primary and secondary, more in the region of, VR, virtual reality, and then augmented reality, because what it does do is to allow for the practical part of education to be used in practical part of the textbook to be used in a much better way, where we can understand a lot. Because we used to read about, a whole lot of history and geography without literally knowing anything. And then, of course, the last SDG that's part of financial inclusion is in reducing inequality, and as we've already spoken about this. So RBI asked this question, and RBI did a survey on this to understand as to why are people being excluded out of the financial system. Because if you think about it, it has been, I think, almost 30 odd years where all regulators and the government is trying to push forward that people should have bank accounts, people should use the bank accounts, people should invest properly. I think most people around this room would know that we are still very, very behind when it comes to investment in the market. And this is one example that I give. And I think many of us would have heard about nudge as well. That the point being that perpetually, when we have earned our salaries, we've actually had, PF go out of our salary. And PF, as you know, till almost, I think, about 60, 70 years of the life of the PF, it could invest only in government securities. You couldn't even put money into equity or even in mutual funds, forget direct equity. And then, so that's how our money grew. That's how the government was willing to give us some 6%, I think it's about 8% now, but it used to be slightly higher. But that's how our money, our forced saving has grown. But first of all, we know that not everybody is eligible for PF. And even otherwise, when we think about capital formation of India's capital formation, the capital formation is not going to happen through only issuance of government securities, because that's how infrastructure is funded. That's not how private capital and capital formation can happen. And we have never thought about it in the way that India needs. So therefore, our capital formation was poor. The market capitalization of the stock exchange, all the companies listed on the stock exchange, was fairly lower. It's still much, much lower. But when I first moved into the National Stock Exchange, I'd been in capital markets before that, but when I moved to the National Stock Exchange, I think our market capitalization of NSE was about $2 trillion. And NYSE, New York Stock Exchange, was about 20 trillion. But over a period of time, New York has not changed much, but ours has moved a substantial amount. We are almost, I think, at about 4.5 trillion, maybe even, I think, about 4 trillion and something. The point being that, financial exclusion really leaves out a lot of people in this country. And when RBI thought about it, these are the things that they came back with as to why there is exclusion. firstly, income. I mean, income, we need to do something about it, and government is doing something about it, and so on and so forth. There are skill development organizations. There is the Apprenticeship Act, and so on and so forth. And government is pushing the job creation agenda. But a lot of the other things, when you think about the other factors which are there on this slide, not suitable for customer requirement. Almost, we don't have a simple product. Almost every product will be complex in such a way that people either don't understand and therefore they don't go ahead with the product, or they just sign off without necessarily understanding the risk. Lack of awareness. Even people who are in the banks, who are supposed to be selling us third-party products, don't seem to know enough. And you ask 6 questions and they're quite blank. Transaction costs are very, very high. Not everybody is able to reach everybody. And the basic quality, at the end of the day, if there is no trust, and if the people who are selling us something don't know much, then the quality of the services that we do get is going to be materially impacted. And that's really why India has not necessarily moved a lot in terms of the financial products available to us. It has always been a government push, whether it is, getting the basic demat account in, getting a basic bank account in, getting basic everything. The people that are actually producers of the product don't necessarily seem to understand what is it that the people want and what is it that they should provide for. It's always fairly complex in the way that the products are structured and sold to us. And in India, and a lot of the world too, but in India for sure, almost every product is sold. And one of the things that financial literacy is supposed to do is to actually change that. I don't think I will see it in my lifetime, but nevertheless, what financial literacy is expected to do, what if it does achieve, what would be really great is it is a bot. People know that this is what they want and they go out and buy it. That's what we do for the rest of our lives. We go and buy things. Of course, there is a concept of temptation, and then once you are in social media, you're searching for travel, you will only see travel, or if you're searching for clothes, then you will see more of that. But it's not as if we don't know what we are buying. Financial products are probably one of the few things where we almost have no clue as to what we are buying. The documents which come along with it are some 40, 60 pages, literally, and much educated people have almost no clue. So now coming back to the meat of what we do, financial literacy. Financial literacy, again, global attention, because of the fact that very, very few people globally, in India anyway, are aware, are informed customers. And the whole global financial crisis of 2008 was predicated on the fact that people didn't know what they were doing. People did not understand that variable rate means that rates could go up substantially. And if I'm paying 4% today, it could very well be that tomorrow I'm going to have to pay 8%, which means the exact money will double. There are a lot of people who don't understand the difference between percentages and absolute amounts. Sometimes they will balk at saying, no, it is increased by 100%. But if the absolute amount is 50 rupees, is going to 100 rupees, it's still not a problem. But so therefore, this whole calculation seems to, in a way, not be, people are not necessarily aware. And then, of course, there are various, and this is the situation with large corporates and large institutions like AIG, who did not know what they were, they are a $1 trillion company, and they don't know what they were doing. Then what can you frankly expect from the more vulnerable population, which is the women and the youth? More importantly, think about youth and elderly, and I'm leaving out the middle age here. But the way the youth are today into futures and options, the way, and I, as part of capital markets, having been here for a lot of time, it pains me that people are losing money without even knowing what they're doing. The whole finance options and futures that people are trading in. Just to give you one number, one of the reports, if I'm not mistaken, said that the Indian retail population has lost about 180,000 crores to foreign companies and potentially proprietary houses that trade in shares, that trade F&O, and sit inside the exchanges as part of co-location. You're actually competing against a machine, and unless it's a very it's a movie where you want to show a human being winning against a machine. It's almost impossible. Especially you cannot win against today's machines. Therefore, some of the things that, the way the youth are losing money, we've heard of youth thinking that there is no way out. There have been suicides. A lot of this can hopefully be, hopefully be turned around. If there was a little more awareness, it may not get completely turned around, because there is this whole concept that I trade options and futures, therefore I'm very glamorous. This is a glamorous thing to do. Nevertheless, at least to the people that are unaware, one might be able to make a difference. The other part is the elderly. So, and this we see all the time, just as the person retires, and we see this across, so across classes, whether it is rich, whether it is poor, whether it's middle class, we see this across people. Armed forces, we see it across people who have worked in corporates, people who have worked elsewhere, and hospitals. We see this across the board. Almost immediately when the person is retiring, there are a lot of people who will come, who sort of in a way say that we are your Shubh Chintak, so to speak. We are your well-wishers. This is how you must put your money in. I could sit here and I give you multiple examples where people have actually sold the good shares that they had, solid shares, which may not necessarily be making a whole lot of money. There is a dividend income to be made, and then it's sort of the price is going up fairly in a step-by-step manner gradually. But people have taken out those shares, put it in, sold all their entire thing, and put it into shares which are highly volatile. Yes, 4 rupees may become 8 rupees in 2 months, but highly volatile. If you continue to hold those shares, and there's nobody else to, in a way, to take that from you, then you end up finding that it's gone to zero. I mean, the number of people that come when we do our programs, when we talk to people during the programs, almost everybody has a story like that. Not to even mention the number of people that get into guaranteed returns, the number of people who get taken in by predatory debt, which sort of says that here is your debt, and we'll talk about it in a little while. But just the number of people that seem to lose money for lack of information, for lack of awareness, is substantial. And the other part is the next question would then be that, how can we make everybody aware? One of the tools, it can never be in person, right? You don't cover a country of 1.4 billion people in person. One would have to think about various design tools where the messaging is stark, but something that can actually be taken, and it's not a whole lot of 20 pages paper. Nobody's going to read it. And the second part of what is very, very important, and I'd really spend 10 seconds on this, is process literacy. If we know what to do, and more importantly, if we know how to do, then we are in a much better shape to manage our money. So I can sit here and pontificate and tell hundreds of people that you must convert your savings to investment. Within investment, you must do your asset allocation, you must do your risk, you must see what risk you want to accept. If you do not know how, if you do not know the process of how to go about it, it is just a lecture. And therefore, part of a very, very important part of financial literacy is also the process literacy, which is how. How do you do a certain thing? How do you look at it? What are the rules? Is there a rule which sort of says how much I should put money into equity, how much money I should do X, in how many years will my money double? What is the amount if I'm retired? And these are all benchmarks, right? The rules are not for everybody. Exception proves the rule. Therefore, at retirement, if I don't have any other way of, if I have not reskilled myself, I have no other way of earning, how much do you think I should be able to take out each year, so that the money lasts for the next 20 years, lasts for the next 30 years. And because all of us, the life expectancy is changing anyway. So therefore, how do we do this is something which I think is a very, very important part of financial literacy. And lastly, the whole digital financial services. We spoke about predatory loans. The number of people, and this includes not just the poor people, it's not just the drivers, it's not just the people who are imbibing a lot of content through the net, OTT, whatever the platforms. It is people who are supposed to know better, who actually just click on the loan, easily available. You're eligible to get 5 lakh loan without even thinking about whom you're borrowing from. What is the likely interest rate? What will happen if you don't pay? The number of people who've got into a debt situation, and especially when you combine debt with, needing to pay for margin calls for F&O, the people, there's very little time, and almost everybody is thinking at that point of time that, okay, I've lost money, I will borrow, I will give it as margin, whatever it is, and I will make more money. It's very the mindset is that of, in a loose way, gambling. So coming back to it, so when we're thinking about all of these, when we're thinking about financial literacy, when we're thinking about awareness, when we're thinking about what do we need to do, and we're talking about SDGs, we're talking about the general well-being of the society, let's see what the size of the problem is. And when we think about the size of the problem, also, what is the level? So are people at the ground floor? Are people at the first floor? Are people at the second floor? And so on and so forth. So this is the metrics that we have. The metrics that we have actually says that 70%, and this is the metric where people say that they are, they don't understand finance, right? There are a lot of people who will tell you that they understand finance, but they actually don't. So therefore, 70% of India's population are actually financially illiterate. So that is the size of your problem. Very few understand insurance. Very few people. Now, of course, thanks to campaigns like, a mutual fund Sahi Hai, there are a lot of people who understand mutual funds. Very few people understand real estate. And as a strategy, not real estate for living, not residential real estate for living, but real estate as a strategy. Is there money to be made in real estate if you are to actually, put a long-term strategy in place? Financial planning, longer term opportunities that are available for entrepreneurship. What is the skill development possibilities? Are there actual platforms that are given by the government where you can actually put your product or service in a way which is much less expensive, and therefore obviously the spread will be higher for you? Very few people, and even when people understand it, and recently I was doing a session with the women who are entrepreneurs already and are available in a strata of society which is fairly high, what we would call upper middle class or even rich people. There are a lot of things which people did not even understand. They did not understand. They've given their money, and when we talk about rich, they've given their money to portfolio managers. They didn't understand that they could have a say in it. They thought that a portfolio manager will do what they will do, and you have no say. So there are a lot of nuances. I mean, finance is a seriously large subject, right? There's just so many nuances that you need to understand if you need to manage your money properly. And then, of course, mis-selling is a class problem. In our programs, we talk about insurance in some amount of depth. I will not say great depth, but one thing we certainly tell people that don't combine life insurance and investment, right? If you want life insurance, take term. There is no merit in combining life insurance with any other kind of insurance, whether it is money back policy or whole life policy or whatever else, endowment, etc. If there's a single, if you want it as a debt product where you will not lose money, that's a separate matter. Then you can put into, potentially, having looked at the cost and everything, you might think about a ULIP or you might think about certain other things, but don't use this as an investment vehicle. It's not. And that basic understanding itself takes a long time because, if you pay a premium, a bulk of it goes for your mortality. And so therefore you should not be using it as an investment product. Itself is a matter of, it takes that much effort to actually talk to people about it. The fact that you need to make a budget, the fact that you need to understand debt, the fact that you need to understand what forms of debt, therefore, asset, potentially asset is house, potentially car will depreciate. Even those basics takes a lot of time for people to get what we're talking about. Right, but car loan is available at whatever, 10%. Why can't we buy a car? Of course, please do. but there's a meaning to it. There's an EMI at the end of it. And therefore, if you are going to buy that car and you absolutely need that car and you're going to buy it, please understand that the long-term effects of the money that you've not saved by buying the car has not gone into investment, has not had the benefit of compound interest, has not then 3 years from now potentially would have grown to X amount, but you're spending that today, and therefore you will not have that money. These are all difficult conversations, which, I mean, frankly, are not the easiest of conversations that we are thinking about. And the last part that I will talk of, two parts to more that I will talk about, risk and return. Almost everybody, and these are people that many of them are in finance. These are people that are working in corporates, hold responsible jobs, are professionals. They will only look at the return, almost never at the risk. So I've got so much return. What is the underlying risk? Will we continue to get the same return? What is the meaning of volatility? These are not conversations that are commonplace. People just do not talk about it. And the last point is, almost nobody will talk about a fraud that may have happened to themselves, where we spoke about guaranteed returns, where somebody would have taken the money, would have said, and I saw this as an example yesterday, an IAS officer has actually gone to somebody and given money, some 1 crore rupees or something like that. It's gone to zero because that person has invested, God knows, or whether it was a Ponzi scheme and has been given to pay off somebody. It's gone to zero. Nobody will talk about it. Nobody will complain to the police. When I was in NSE, about 32 odd brokers defaulted during that period because we changed the regulation and we went after a lot of people who were misusing the client's asset. And there are so many people, including CFOs, would come back to us. People who had been chairman, managing directors, people who had a lot of money. Everybody would come back to us and say, oh, he was a good broker. He promised X amount of return. So we gave the money to him. But you're not allowed to. Nobody's allowed to promise X amount of return. Market by definition is risky. Market risk is a risk. It will go up, it will go down. But just that whole protection from fraud mentality, I find is frankly, maybe it's temptation, maybe it's something else, I do not know. But that's something which a lot of people who are supposed to be aware still manage to get themselves into a little bit of a financial problem, sometimes a lot of financial problem. Just because either they're not aware or keep that aware voice, that angel on your shoulder separately and say, this will not happen to me. Ye mere saath nahi ho sakta. But that's just the way things are. Coming back to the sustainable goals, and to me there are about 7 or 8 goals which fall under financial inclusion as part of SDGs. But to me there is one more goal, quality education, which is also part of not necessarily financial inclusion in SDGs, but which we as DHERA consider as something that financial literacy does. But coming back, there are 5. No poverty, clearly, financial literacy. So if we were to sort of drill down into each of the 5, let's see where we land. So no poverty is underserved communities. If we teach them just basics, including, and Jan Dhan accounts, the JAM accounts have done a phenomenal job of at least making people aware that the bank account, there is a concept of bank account, there can be money in it, it will be safe, don't need to keep it under your bed, you don't need to keep it in the house. So financial literacy is a key part of giving people the knowledge, and more importantly then through process literacy, the tools to actually achieve economic independence. Is economic independence an easy thing, and will only financial literacy achieve it? Absolutely not. It's just a small cog in the entire wheel of removing poverty, because once people understand that they can do other things, even people understand that, for example, a simple example, right? If people know that there is a concept of GEM, which is a government e-marketplace, where you can put any product from literally a pen, a towel to the most expensive thing that the government buys, the spreads are much more. You make a lot more money by simply putting it in GEM. What does it take? a very small registration process, but people are not aware. People are giving a lot of money to the e-commerce portals, etc. And what they share with you is materially less. But people are not aware of these opportunities. The next is quality education. When we think about quality education, we believe that financial literacy, and I think a lot of people in this country believe that financial literacy should not be taught once the person is, ready for a job. It needs to be taught at school level. And financial literacy and just the whole concept of we still, and attitudes are changing, but we're still a little wary of talking about money and talking about wealth and talking about the fact that we have money. Entrepreneurship was not necessarily thought of as a great thing till a few years ago. And quality education, if you make financial literacy, I think, as part of the basic education, school education itself, when people come out of school itself, they may be able to make a much different choice in terms of their career. Let's keep money and investment aside for a minute. Even in terms of their career, they may be able to use whatever information they've got, whatever knowledge they've got, as part of the school curriculum to actually decide on what do I want to do going forward, which pathway do I want to take from a professional education or a master's, or do I need to work now? A lot of those discussions at this point of time are taking place in a little bit of a vacuum. They're taking place in a situation where you're considering certain things, but not the financial aspect. So education loans. At what rate is it available? What are the terms of the education loans? Is it better will I get a better rate or a lower rate? If, for example, I work for 2 years, I get some experience. Will I get a better scholarship when I go out to study? I mean, there are so many decisions which are being made, as I said, in a vacuum, not necessarily with the financial aspects which come into it. And therefore, we honestly think that quality education is a very, very key part of financial literacy and therefore financial inclusion. Gender equality, I've spoken, discussed various things in terms of number of years. Girls, they have to have access to finances. Government is doing its part. In many states, there is no stamp duty or there's no registration fee when women own assets. But I think it's very important that we actually get a lot of women step out and have access to not just to resources, but able to convert those resources into asset ownership. Because that the level of confidence that gives you to manage your own life, honestly, I think that is key. Gender equality will happen as a matter of that's the goal. It probably will happen as a consequence of a lot of other things. But just the access to resources, access to the fact that the asset ownership. I mean, I remember when I grew up, the house actually belonged to my father, and the first asset that I bought for myself was a car. I know I just said this that one should not buy a car with loan because it's a depreciating asset, but there's also the emotional aspect. The first thing that I owned, which was big, not clothes or things, was a car. And frankly, the kind of happiness that gave me because I could own that asset. I think all our men and all our women and all our girls require to have that happiness in their lives. Asset ownership, according to me, and control of finances is very, very key. The next part is how do we financial decisions. So why is decent work and economic growth a part of SDGs? Economic growth and decent work, in a way, why if you were to think about of economics, it should not be part of SDGs, because today when we think about economic growth, what we are really seeing is it has been fueled to a large part through oil, there's a lot of construction that needs to happen. There are a lot of industries that need to get set up for that economic growth, which don't fall within the larger sustainability framework in the first place, because they're all polluting industries, carbon, whether it is in terms of releasing carbon monoxide, whether it is in terms of increasing the temperature. But I think, and SSB does a great job with this. The whole discussion, at least for the past decades, has been towards a more sustainable economic growth that benefits larger number of individuals, and not just people in the US or Western Europe or pockets of, say, Australia or New Zealand and so on. Larger number of people should be taking part in this growth. Larger number of people should be finding decent work, and which is why it's sustainable. But from a financial literacy perspective, again, it's pretty much the same thing. Companies, if they were to make their financial decisions, and so therefore this may not have much to do with personal finance, but if companies were to make their financial decisions on the basis of the opportunities that could be available to people, a simple thing, right? It's as simple as work from home. That decreases the amount of travel, carbon, and I live in Delhi. Ask me about it. If I go out and my throat starts burning because there's just so much pollution in the air. So just that one decision, which may be a social decision, which may be a financial decision, can contribute to a very different way of economic growth. But to make those decisions, one needs to understand numbers. At the end of the day, these are all numbers. At the end of the day, these are all numbers and these are all trade-offs. So one needs to understand how will you calculate the numbers in the first place, and what is the trade-off that you're willing to accept. So that's how we think about SDGs and financial literacy from SDG 8, which is economic growth. How does all of this finally come around? I think all of this just comes around if we all had to have the level of awareness that is at an optimum level. By definition, that has to necessarily, reduce inequality. That's just the way it is. And when we're talking about inequality, and again, the conversation about inequality seems to be around the top 1% or top 0.01%. That this industrialist has gone from A billion to B billion. This has become the wealth. But income inequality is not that. Income inequality is more to do with the next set of people. How low is your low? And if you keep that 0.1% outside, because that is a complete outlier and actually skews the entire equality conversation. How is it that the next set of people and the bottom set of people, what is that gap? And how can we bring more people up? People keep just talking about Indian middle class. But if you were to look at purchasing power parity, for example, India is still very, very cheap. Let's keep rent of Bombay and Delhi and Bangalore aside. India is still exceedingly cheap in terms of availability of labor, availability of goods, availability of other services. So how do we bring all of this up is a definite conversation to have. But if each of us were to use our money optimally, and that includes individuals, that includes companies, that includes entrepreneurs in the running of their own businesses, I think the inequality has to necessarily reduce, and that is certainly one of the goals as part of the SDGs. So I'm just going to stop here because that is my presentation, but I'd like to continue the conversation if people have questions, if people want to discuss other things. The final part is really lack of awareness. What does it do? Harmful financial practices for sure. You don't have your financial safety net, which then pushes you into more harmful practices. Because if you need money and you're desperate for money, and whether you're a company, whether you're a business, whether you're an individual, if you need money and you don't have it, that's going to take you to certain decisions which certainly going to be harmful in the long run. Vulnerability to fraud. It's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy in that way, because each one leads to the next. So I'm going to stop here. Thank you, Dr. Dasgupta, and I'm open for questions.
Thank you, ma'am. So there are a few questions. The first one is, what role does financial literacy play in supporting SDG 5 gender equality by empowering women and reducing the gender-based economic disparities?
So one is the financial literacy can do two things. One is it can actually increase increase awareness of the opportunities available. So let's keep saving and money and investment aside for a minute. By definition, and why it is so, I do not know. But women are more cautious than men in investing. Now, why that is so, I do not know. Even people who are aware are little more
Right.
cautious.
Right.
But let's talk about the first part. The first part is skill development. How can you use your skill to earn money is one of the essential parts of financial literacy. So let me take the example of, say, a self-help group, Lijat Papad. Now, am I going to teach as part of financial literacy? Am I going to teach the women how to make the papad? Obviously not, because I do not know it. But what we can do is to talk about what are the different markets available. We spoke about GEM. There's also a market called ONDC. There are like 10 other markets which are aggregator markets. How to market? How should you talk about yourself? How should you think about yourself? What is the difference between cash of the business and cash in hand? I.e., if you remove the cash from the business and use it, then you're not going to have what is working capital. And there are lots of things that you can actually teach women, which are not necessarily very, what can I say? It's not intuitive because people have not been taught,
Right.
And this is the other example which I keep giving. Khana banane ke liye bhi, it is intuitive to us, but it is intuitive because we have been taught. If you don't know the difference between salt and sugar, it's not intuitive. But because you do know, because you have these are parts of things which you have grown up with, you can now make different things. You can actually work with different ingredients and make something which is different, which your mother has not taught you. However, it's part of your learning. Almost everybody, it's part of almost every woman's learning, rightly or wrongly. It is, and therefore, intuitively you can do other things with it. So financial literacy in that sense contributes to. And secondly, paisa takat hota hai. It's a simple thing. Like it, don't like it, paisa takat hota hai. And therefore, if you know how to manage your money, if you know how to increase it, you become a much more confident individual. If there are other things in your life which are not working well, whatever it may be, your personal situation, the fact that you have money is a huge amount of confidence, right? So that's how we think that, and so therefore skill development and using your own money to make more money, to create your own asset. I think that's the way we think about women's empowerment.
Thank you, ma'am. There's another question, ma'am. How can governments and financial institutions promote financial literacy as a means to foster responsible consumption and production?
See, governments do a lot of work. So therefore, RBI has something called Centers for Financial Literacy. They do that in almost every district and every block. And therefore, they teach you what are the loans, how should you think about the loans. Again, predatory loans. Now these days, I think RBI, many of you would have read, RBI has come down very heavily on quite a few digital lenders because of the fact that they charge loans as an absolute amount. So if you think about, if I'm giving you 5,000 rupees and taking 500 as interest, it's not 10%. As an annualized, it is probably 40. And there is no such thing. There is, when you go to the digital UI screen, these things are not available. Nobody gives you effective rate.
Yes.
Right. So therefore, what the government has been doing, so RBI does CFLs. SEBI, PFRDA and IRDA hold financial literacy sessions sometimes through providers like us, sometimes through other agencies as well. There are like 100, in fact, there are 15,000 ITIs, the industrial training centers. There are, I think, about 14,000 something or the other centers for skill development, which have been started by the government. This is under the PM Kaushal Vikas Yojana. So therefore, the government is actually spending a lot of money in terms of trying to understand, trying to impart this whole financial literacy. But you're talking about responsible production and responsible consumption. Responsible consumption gets taken care of if you think about, if you know and understand financial literacy, right? Responsible consumption is also about bartering, is also about using each asset. For example, my phone is 5 years old. I would never even think of changing it till it has outlived its usefulness. My car is 10 years old. I would not even think of changing it till such time as the government says, this is BS3, BS4, BS something or the other, because it's useful.
Yes.
So because I know that this money saved, put into an SIP will then create wealth of this much. 5 years from now, 3 years from now, 10 years from now. Production is a different game. I don't think government financial literacy per se, unless you're talking about entrepreneurs, single entrepreneurs, who can think about, again, a working capital, production life cycle, how do you use your money to the maximum, those kinds of things. To me, at least, it does not have a huge amount of effect or impact on production, unless it's a single entrepreneur or a small SHG or something like that, or farmers.
Thank you, ma'am. Here's another question, ma'am. How can increased financial literacy aid in reducing the inequalities by enabling marginalized communities to access financial resources and services?
Sorry, what's the first part of the question?
How can increased financial literacy aid in reducing the inequalities by enabling marginalized communities to access financial resources and services?
Financial literacy is one part. Let's take a step back and start talking in terms of the services in the first place. Services, so India is a data-rich country. The large populations have access to, nowadays, smartphones. Thanks to some of our service providers, there is internet available almost in every part of India. And therefore, we are a data-rich country. We already know that we consume the maximum amount of OTT data. Right? Almost everybody has their phone and they're watching something or the other. The content that is created in India is huge. It's probably many countries. And therefore, financial products, and therefore people can have access to their phones. They can have access to financial products. However, financial products are not being manufactured. Now let's think about it in a slightly different way. I may have thought that I may understand about finance. I may have thought that I should buy XYZ product. It's not available. Simple products don't make money. Therefore, they are not sold. Simple products will not make money, right? If I keep money in a bank, I want you to keep money. If I'm a bank, I want you to keep money in the savings account. I don't want you to take it out. I will make it as painful as possible for you to invest it somewhere else, because my incentive is not aligned with yours. I want to give you, in fact, I would love if you open a current account and put money in it, because I don't even have to pay you interest. Therefore, when I lend it out, I make a huge amount of interest margin. So financial literacy will make you more aware that these are the practices that people can do. But think about our marginalized communities. We were just talking yesterday, and somebody whom I know, very closely in the social sector, does this day in and day out. Marginalized communities have no access to anything. Financial services is still some way away. We are thinking in terms of livelihood. Livelihood is first, then we come to financial products. But one part of financial literacy is also livelihood. Trying to tell people, make people aware of what are the different livelihood methodologies, what can they potentially do. Also, the advocacy part of financial literacy is actually talking to various industries, various other people, to try and bring certain products, certain services to the marginalized community. After that, we think in terms of savings and investment. That's all step 3 and step 4. But the first thing is livelihood, getting people to give them the right livelihood. Then you talk about awareness. But there is an advocacy piece of financial literacy, which was not necessarily relevant to this audience, which I didn't speak about. But this is something that we do whenever we are in. So therefore, when we are talking to industries, when we are talking to corporates, this is part of what we talk about. That there is a piece here there is this community, they need this service. Can you arrange for this? And as part of that, we will also teach you something else.
Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, there is another last two questions for you. One is, how does financial literacy education impact sustainable cities and communities by enabling citizens to contribute to local economic stability and resilience?
The financial literacy, what it does do is to make you aware of the environment and the ecosystem. Local communities, the financial literacy is not going to directly impact local communities, right? People, when they become, so the Maslow's law. So when you think about the Maslow's hierarchy, you start off with your basics and then you move on. The way I found a lot of people doing this, and Maslow's hierarchy is in a way a reality. So when through your financial literacy, when you are moving higher and higher in the whole society value chain, certain other things start impacting you. Now, if you think about it, why did you and I, Dr. Dasgupta, why did you, many other people potentially who joined us, we started wearing polyester. In the 80s, that was the answer. We did not have enough money. We came from middle class, right?
Right.
We used products that were available. Our children think about cotton, sustainable products, etc., because they don't worry about basics. We have provided it to them.
Absolutely right.
They worry about, again, Maslow's hierarchy. They worry about the next set. So money in that sense, or financial literacy, contributes in a little bit of an indirect manner. Because once you start having that basics in place, then you start thinking about other things in life. So that's how I would think about. So when you think about local communities, there are a lot of people who are actually very well off, who are actually mobilizing the local community to buy local, not just in food. Buy local in food is exceedingly sustainable. You don't want to eat quinoa from Argentina. You may as well eat bajra from here or jowar from here. Jowar and nachni are so much better rather than quinoa, which is imported. So the long and short is, I think, when certain things are already become a part of your life, you start thinking about other things, and that's how I think the local communities might be much better served. I don't think there's a direct relationship. At least I'm not able to define a direct relationship.
And the last question for today's session, as you know, that the Institute of Cost Accountants of India, we produce the finest of financial professionals. So what do you think what the role do educational institutions play in advancing financial literacy as a path towards sustainable development goals?
See, so let's look at two different things. You're a professional institution. As you said, you have the, possibly India's best professionals as part of ICMAI. So there are two parts. One is getting that education itself. Therefore, if you start financial literacy from the school, that makes for much better individuals for them to make their education choices, career choices, and so on and so forth. Therefore, they will then make those choices which will make sense for the society as we think about it. But as ICMAI professionals, there's just large swaths of people who are not even part of, we don't even, so I made one reference when I started. There is bottom of the pyramid and there's a bottom of the investment pyramid. That difference itself is significant. Bottom of the pyramid, people have no access to finance. I mean, they have access to finance, but in such a limited way. Predatory loans, local sahukars, adatiyas, when you come for the farming community, they don't have access to formal finance, which is formal finance, which is with a reasonable rate of interest. Let me put it this way. They have access to finance. Sometimes they lose their land, they lose their collateral. So therefore the difference between the bottom of the pyramid and bottom of the investment pyramid itself is substantial. So as ICMAI, I would frankly encourage a lot more of you to go out there and see what you can do in the financial literacy space. Even if 10 people were to convert some portion of their income to 100 rupee SIPs, and now we are going into sachet investments, right? 500 rupees is the minimum amount for SIPs. And it can be done on the phone. So you need not fill a form. It can be quite easily done on the phone, and people understand. If people can figure out, just about most of our population, including men and women who are over 80, can figure out how to use WhatsApp, send messages every day, attach video files. ये तो हो ही सकता है. So if that, I would frankly, encourage everybody to take that one step in your local communities if possible, and any part of the ecosystem, to make people aware at least. And then the other things hopefully will be, as you said, Dr. Dasgupta, a ripple effect.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you very much. Now, as we conclude this insightful and engaging webinar on this topic, it is my pleasure to extend a heartfelt vote of thanks. Firstly, I would thank our esteemed guest speaker, Ms. Priya Subramanian, for her invaluable time, knowledge, and passion. Ma'am, your insights on how financial literacy serves as a foundation of achieving these SDGs have not only broadened our perspectives, but also empowered us to take these actionable steps towards these goals. The way you have connected the financial literacy to the key areas like poverty reduction, gender inequality, and economic stability has truly highlighted its impact and driving the positive change. Thank you so much, ma'am, for being here. It's our pleasure and honor to have you with us. Now I would thank
my pleasure and my privilege. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Now I would thank CMA Vibhuti Bhushan Nayak, President, Institute of Cost Accountants of India, CMA TCS Srinivasa Prasad, Vice President, Institute of Cost Accountants of India, CMA Dr. Ashish Thatte, Chairman, Sustainability Standard Board, and all the SSB members for the guidance support, and CMA Dipendra Roy, Secretary SSB, for his motivation and trust. I would also like to thank each participant for their active involvement, questions, and thoughtful engagement. Really, your enthusiasm and curiosity has made this session a success. Lastly, a big thank you to our organization team, whose efforts and dedications have ensured this event to run smoothly. This webinar has indeed reminded us of the transformative power of financial literacy in realizing UN's Sustainable Development Goals. As we live today, may we carry forward this knowledge, continue learning, and commit ourselves to fostering a financially available and empowered world. Thank you all once again, and we look forward for seeing you at our future events. Thank you. Thank you very much.